All right, so today we're going to be looking at something that you might think you've already mastered.
Oh.
Formal versus informal English.
Yeah.
You're probably already pretty good at it, right?
Most people are, yeah.
But we are going to go beyond just good.
Okay.
We're going for masterful.
I like it.
We're unlocking a secret code today
A secret code.
to help you tailor your communication
Okay.
to make the maximum impact possible.
Right.
Whether you're trying to, be super credible in the boardroom
Right.
or just bond better with your friends.
Yeah, and that's the key, isn't it? It's not just about knowing the rules, but it's about understanding the why behind them.
The why.
Yeah, like why does a certain word choice make us feel a certain way? How do these subtle shifts in language, really impact our perceptions and interactions?
Yeah, and we're basing this deep dive on a podcast called Fluent Conversations.
Okay.
And one of the things that really surprised me was how easy it is to sabotage yourself by using the wrong level of formality.
Oh, interesting.
Like, imagine you're at a networking event.
Okay.
And you're trying to, project this air of confidence and professionalism. But instead of saying something like, "Excuse me, would you mind if I joined your conversation?"
Whoa.
You blurt out, "Yo, can I hang with you guys?"
Oof, yeah, that's cringeworthy.
Right.
Yeah, it really highlights how these small choices we make can have a big impact on how we're perceived.
Totally.
It's not just about grammar. It's about social intelligence.
Ooh, I like that.
Understanding the unspoken rules of communication
Yeah.
and using them to your advantage.
Yeah, the podcast had this great example that really stuck with me.
Okay.
They compared the phrases, "I'm afraid I must decline your offer," to "Sorry, but I'll have to say no."
Yeah.
And it just made me realize that even when the message is the same, the feeling is totally different.
Absolutely. The first one feels very stiff and distant, almost like you're putting up a wall.
Right.
The second one is much warmer, more human,
Yeah.
even though it's still saying no.
Yeah.
It shows you can be direct, but you don't have to be harsh.
So how do we break down this code of formality?
Well,
Fluent Conversations identified 3 key elements.
okay.
And the first one is vocabulary.
Vocabulary, I think about it this way. Every word carries a certain weight, a certain formality level.
Okay.
For instance, require versus need, inquire versus ask.
Yeah.
Even something simple like assist versus help.
Oh, interesting.
These little swaps can instantly elevate your language or make it more approachable.
Okay, so it's not just about using fancy words.
Right.
It's about understanding which words fit the situation.
Exactly. It's about matching your vocabulary to the context and to the person that you're speaking with. And it goes beyond individual words.
Okay.
Sentence structure plays a big role as well.
Sentence structure.
Yeah, the formal language tends towards longer, more complex sentences,
Okay.
often using the passive voice.
Like the report was submitted by the deadline.
Yes.
Instead of I sent in the report on time.
That's a great example. The first one feels detached and objective, right?
Yeah.
More appropriate maybe for formal reports or academic writing.
Yeah.
Informal language, though, it embraces contractions and phrasal verbs. It has a more relaxed conversational flow.
Yeah.
It's about creating that sense of connection, immediacy.
And of course, we can't forget about punctuation and greetings.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, obviously, "Dear Mr. Johnson" versus "Hey, Alex" is a pretty clear distinction.
Right.
But what about the subtle stuff?
That's where it gets interesting. Even something as simple as how you sign off an email.
Oh.
Sincerely versus best
Yeah.
can convey a lot about your relationship with the recipient
Right.
and the tone of the message. It's like the finishing touch that sets the seal on the whole communication.
So how do we put all this knowledge into practice?
Well,
It's one thing to understand the theory, but
Yeah.
how do we actually use it in different situations?
right. Well, that's where context comes in. Fluent Conversations did a good job at breaking it down,
Okay.
by looking at specific situations.
Okay.
Like emails or meetings or even casual chats.
That's super helpful. So let's start with emails. I feel like those can be tricky.
Oh, yeah.
Because you want to sound professional, but not like stiff,
Where emails often straddle that line between formal and informal.
Right.
You're not writing a legal document.
Yeah.
But you're also not texting your best friend.
Yeah.
So the podcast really emphasized, polite greetings,
Okay.
maintaining a professional tone throughout, and avoiding slang or like overly casual abbreviations.
So no, "Hey, dude, what's up?" It's my boss.
Probably a good idea to avoid that, yeah.
Okay, good rule of thumb. What about meetings and presentations?
Yeah.
Those feel like they're more on the formal end of the spectrum.
They often are, yeah, especially in professional settings.
Yeah.
The podcast really highlighted the importance of using transitional words and phrases
Okay.
to guide the listener through your ideas.
Okay.
Things like, furthermore, in addition, on the other hand, These little words can make your presentation sound much more structured and polished.
It's like you're building a case, almost.
Exactly.
Leading them to your conclusion.
Right. And, those polite phrases we talked about earlier, like, could we possibly discuss, or I'd like to propose, those become even more important in these kind of settings.
Right.
Shows respect for everybody's time and input.
Okay, so we've covered emails and meetings. What about more casual interactions?
Sure.
Like friendly chats or texts?
Yeah, that's where you can loosen up a bit,
Okay.
Contractions, phrasal verbs, even emojis are all fair game.
Right.
Depending on your relationship with the person.
But how do you make sure that you're not crossing the line?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I once accidentally called my professor dude in an email.
Oh, no.
Oh, I wanted to die.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
I think the key is just being really mindful of your audience and the overall context.
Context.
Yeah. It's like choosing the right outfit, right?
Okay.
You wouldn't wear a ball gown to a backyard barbecue.
Right.
And you wouldn't show up to a job interview in sweatpants.
That's a great analogy.
So it's all about matching your communication style to the situation.
But Fluent Conversations also warn about some common pitfalls.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That we can fall into even when we're trying to be careful.
Right. One of the biggest ones is overusing fancy words.
Oh, yeah.
It's tempting to try and sound impressive.
Oh, totally.
But sometimes a simple word is way more effective than a complex one.
Right.
Clarity should always be the goal.
It's like, don't use a $5 word when a 50-cent word will do.
Exactly. Another common pitfall is mixing formal and informal language at the wrong time.
Right.
It creates this jarring effect, like hearing a classical pianist suddenly break into a rap song.
Oh, I'm cringing just thinking about it.
And, the podcast also mentioned cultural differences.
Oh, right.
Which is something I hadn't really considered before.
Yeah.
That's a crucial element,
Yeah.
What's considered polite and respectful in one culture could be seen as overly formal.
Right.
Or even rude in another.
Wow.
For example, in some cultures, it's totally normal to address people by their first names, even in a professional setting.
Yeah.
But in other cultures, using titles and last names is essential even when you know the person well.
So it's not just about knowing the rules of English.
Right.
It's about understanding the cultural context as well.
It does. It adds a whole other layer of complexity.
Totally.
But it also makes communication so much more interesting.
Right.
It's about bridging those cultural gaps and finding ways to connect authentically.
I like that perspective. So we've talked about the pitfalls. What are some strategies for avoiding them? Is it just practice? Practice.
Absolutely. Practice is key.
Okay.
Fluent Conversations had some great suggestions like rereading emails before you send them.
Okay.
Getting feedback from like a trusted colleague or friend.
Yeah.
And even role-playing different situations.
Okay.
To get comfortable with both formal and informal styles.
I remember they also suggested that role play exercise.
Oh, yeah?
Where you write a formal email and then an informal text message about the same topic.
Yes.
Have you tried that one yet?
Oh, yeah.
It was
How'd it go?
It was challenging, but it was really eye-opening.
Interesting. I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, so I decided to use the scenario of asking for a deadline extension.
Okay, classic.
Yeah, right. So for the formal email to my professor, I channeled everything we talked about.
Okay, let me guess. Polite greetings, clear explanation, respectful tone.
Exactly, yeah. It felt like I was stepping into a different persona.
It's interesting how language can do that, right? Like we can embody different roles just by changing the way we speak.
Yeah, and then writing the informal text to a friend about running late because of that same deadline. It was like switching from a waltz to a hip-hop dance.
I bet what stood out to you the most, writing in those two contrasting styles.
It made me realize just how much we adjust our language without even thinking about it,
Yeah, it's subconscious.
Right, but being conscious of those choices.
Right.
Gives you this whole new level of control.
Yeah, that awareness is what makes a good communicator a great communicator.
Yeah, Fluent Conversations also mentioned how formal versus informal language has evolved over time.
Oh, that's a fascinating topic.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's crazy how language is like this living, breathing thing.
It is.
Constantly changing.
Yeah, the Nutcast talked about how centuries ago, formal language was so much more elaborate and ornate.
Right. Makes you appreciate how simple things are now.
Well, simpler, maybe, but also more nuanced.
That's true.
Think about all the changes we've seen with technology and the internet and mass media.
Right.
They've all had such a profound impact on the way we communicate.
Yeah.
Like the lines between formal and informal are constantly being blurred.
Totally. Like emojis and internet slang and abbreviations have become a part of everyday language.
It really makes you wonder what future historians will make of it all.
I know. It's kind of wild to think about.
Yeah, it shows how language is this reflection of our culture and values. What we see as acceptable now might have been unthinkable a few decades ago.
So how do we make sure we're communicating effectively in this constantly evolving landscape?
That's the question, isn't it? It feels like the rules are always changing.
Right.
I don't know if the rules are changing, but I think they're definitely expanding.
Okay. Yeah.
The key is to just stay curious and adaptable.
Okay.
Pay attention to how language is used in different situations.
Yeah.
Whether it's a news article or a social media post. Notice the nuances, the subtle shifts in tone and vocabulary.
So it's like we're all lifelong students of language.
We are.
Always observing and learning.
Exactly. And, fluid conversations reminded us that it's not about being right or wrong.
Right.
It's about using language as a tool to connect with others.
That's a good point. This whole deep dive has just been a great reminder that even something as familiar as language can still have hidden depths and complexities. And by being more mindful of our choices, we can all become more effective communicators. We can build stronger relationships and just navigate the world with more confidence,
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up.
I think so, too.
So listeners, remember, language is power.
It is.
Wield it wisely and watch your world expand.